The plumb line of a second chance. He survived the kind of hit that folds a week in half and still kept walking. Stay with him as one stubborn choice tonight drags old debts into a new dawn. On the western edge of the city, where Westwood Street runs straight as a held breath past brick walk-ups and shuttered storefronts, Alden Rourke carried a box of tools that had grown heavier with the afternoon. He kept his shoulders slightly forward as if the wind always leaned first, boots scuffing paint off the curb, eyes set in that gray that turns green when a cloud opens. He had the stance of a man who worked with studs, plumb lines and warranty tags, though his last job had folded without a call back. He moved like a careful driver on an empty road, no rush, no drift, because swerving wastes fuel. He avoided looking at the pawn shop window where he had left a drill for rent money. He avoided the empty restaurant with its silent chairs because hunger sharpens memory. He told himself that a clean shirt and a firm voice could outweigh the record of late bills if the day stayed steady. The air smelled of hot rubber and city dust, that bitter blend that clings to the tongue after bus breaks sigh. While trains deeper in the grid laid a slow rhythm that pulled his steps. A dent under his left brow caught the light and marked him in passing like a check mark on old paper. On the 5th block he paused under a billboard for an insurance company that promised a softer landing. Promises are easy cargo. He studied the edges where the vinyl curled, then the street numbering on the pole because he needed a reference point for the meeting ahead. Tamsin Rowe had called before noon with a voice that held no patronizing sugar, only a precise cadence that suggested decisions could be cut square if both sides measured twice. She asked him to bring proof that he could keep a regular schedule and a quiet apartment. He had a paper from a day labor haul, a letter from a neighbor, and a draft list of repairs he could do for the landlord in exchange for a break on rent. He carried these pages in a folder pressed tight under his arm, as if warmth could keep words from slipping out of order. The folder felt like a thin roof held over an uncertain forecast. Westwood Street allowed no illusions about the season. The sun leaned down hard, the shade admitted nothing, and every face he passed carried its own small weather. The plan sounded simple on paper. Finish 2 days in a row at the warehouse, bring a receipt from the bus pass, keep the apartment quiet after 10, meet with Tamsin, show that the new rhythm was already a habit. Habits are what remain when the heat drains out of will. He turned at the signal, glanced toward the auto glass shop where he had once patched a cracked window with careful tape, then pushed open the door of a laundromat that was cooler than the street. He swapped his work jacket for a navy shirt that held its shape, rolled his sleeves, and checked the scar that split his brow into 2 short lines. He washed his hands with a thin bar of soap from a dispenser, and watched city dust run away in looping streaks. The mirror had a slight buckle near the corner that bent his face just enough to suggest a second person looking back. Someone who might handle the same day with less strain and more patience. He gripped his folder and left before the mirror asked anything else. The office for family services sat above a tax prep kiosk and a store that sold luggage in colors that did not exist anywhere else on the block. A fan turned behind the glass front like a slow decision. Alden arrived early, because early feels like an argument you can win. He checked the clock, counted the chairs, selected the one with a solid back, and set the folder on his knees. The room had the smell of printed paper and old carpet shampoo, faint but stubborn. Posters on the wall suggested calm with photos of hands that rested on tabletops, palms open, fingers apart. Tamsin came out right on the minute. A compact presence with dark curls pinned up without ceremony, blazer rolled at the cuffs, sneakers clean. A silver ring that caught light only when she turned to point. Her posture kept her center low, like a runner waiting for a start that might not be called. Her voice was even, yes where needed, firm where a line had to hold. She spoke in concrete verbs and kept her sentences short when stakes went up, as if breath should be spent where it solved things. She walked him through the checklist. Income proof, residence stability, neighbor references, a routine that could outlast a bad week. He answered in his spare way, trimming words down to the joinery that mattered. He did not reach for big ideas or soften the edges with promises that smell like sugar. He described the warehouse shift system, the bus route that ran from Westwood to the river, the way he planned to stack small contracts for patch jobs on Saturdays. He named the quiet hours he could keep. He explained that his evenings belonged to Neve, his daughter, that she liked to line up bolts on the table as if sorting constellations. that she slept best when the hallway light made a shallow lake across the floor. He moved carefully here, because naming a child can tilt a room. Tamsin listened without leaning back or forward. She asked a question about the previous eviction, and he owned the details. He had argued with the landlord about mold in the bathroom, and the argument had grown arms. He paid late, then paid late again, and the late fees compounded like snowfall. The notice came the week the auto shop cut staff to half. He had packed quickly, stored boxes in a friend yard, and found a place on Westwood that did not ask questions. The room settled. Paper moved. Pens tapped without hurry. Out the window, a bus let off a hiss that sounded like a man releasing news he had held since morning. Tamsin folded a form and told him the next step was a home visit meant to confirm what paper cannot. She did not soften or bruise the point. Home visits notice things that slip past ink. She would come by after sunset. He considered the lamp with the burned shade in his living room, the leak stain shaped like a map over the kitchen sink, the curtain rod that sagged at one bracket. He calculated what he could fix in a few hours and answered that the door would be open. As he stood, the folder edge caught and a letter slid out. Tamsin reached at the same moment, and their hands met. Her hand was steady and cool. No tremor, no show. She glanced at the letterhead, nodded once, and gave the paper back. Outside, the sky had turned the dull color of a parking lot after rain without the relief of rain. The afternoon pressed down. He started home with a list in his head and the feel of a deadline that no clock showed. Westwood Street kept its own tempo in the late light. A cyclist clipped past with a bag of takeout that rode a warm line through the air. A man on a step shifted his weight to guard a chessboard from a gust that never came. Two kids kicked a crushed bottle cap and argued about rules that changed each time the cap skidded sideways. Alden took the back alley to save a minute, counting the units by the bent gutters, then cut across a cracked lot where dandelions pushed up in brave rows. He knew he needed a working bulb for the hallway, a new strip of caulk for the kitchen, a wipe for the streak along the baseboard, a smell of soap that suggested order. He sorted the plan in layers and assigned each layer to a part of the hour. The last turn brought him to his door, and to a shape he knew from older days. Omari Keene waited against the railing, tall, thin, shoulders tucked, hoodie zipped to his chin though the heat said otherwise. Omari had the quiet of a street kid who learned early to read faces the way grown men read invoices. His smile arrived in small pieces. He lifted 2 bins of wires from a cousin who left town without notice. Alden weighed the favor and said yes, because saying yes here felt like stacking a board that might hold later. He opened the door and the apartment answered with faint detergent from a load finished before dawn. Night held. He set the folder on the table and began the quiet labor that makes small rooms look like promises. A loose screw on the curtain bracket surrendered to a patient turn. The burned lamp took a fresh bulb that warmed to life as if swallowing doubt. He wiped the baseboards with a rag that once had a company logo and now offered only a clean field. He rinsed the sink and cut a straight line of caulk to cover the tired seam. Hands steady, breath even. Forearms taut from years of lifting more than he could catalog. Omari stacked the bins near the radiator and set a timer on his phone for 20 minutes, so he would not overstay. He asked about warehouse work in a tone that carried no complaint, only the practical hunger of a kid who learned to track shifts like weather. Alden described the dock where pallets slid across steel in a rhythm that punished hesitation. He named the foreman who ran the schedule with a quiet scowl. He did not mention how the scowl had softened when Alden stayed late to help a man whose back seized near the loading gate. Kindness does not need a speech. It needs ribs. A soft knock carried from the hall. Neve stepped in with the careful grace of a child who studies rooms before they step fully inside. 10 years old, small for her age, braids slipping out of a red band, a t-shirt with a faded sun rising over a line of small houses. Her eyes held the pale blue that turns steel when rain threatens. She walked on her toes when she was excited, a habit that made her seem to hover above trouble. She placed a library book on the table, as if it were a fragile machine. She said little in public spaces, saving her words for when they could fix a thing. Her hands sorted bolts in old jars and sometimes built bridges across the table from hex nuts and washers, because balance looked like a game until it taught patience. She bumped shoulders with Omari in a way that folded him into the room without ceremony. He called her little engineer, and she accepted the title with a straight face because she liked jobs more than compliments. The day folded toward evening. Through the window they watched a strip of sky adjust from chalk to pewter, while buses marked the hour with slow sighs. Alden cooked rice and eggs in a pan that carried the clean smell of soap. Nothing stuck, nothing blackened. He set 2 plates and kept the portion lines honest. Omari declined, then accepted, and ate with the speed of someone who discovered late that food was present. After, he cleared the plates and checked his timer. He gathered his bins, promised to pick them up Saturday, and left with a nod that read as gratitude and promise in one. Neve opened her book and traced a sentence with a finger as if testing current through a wire. Alden checked the hallway for litter, replaced the porch bulb, and stepped back to judge the wash of light across the threshold. He imagined Tamsin standing there with a clipboard like a flat moon, seeing the scuff marks and the small squares of order he had pinned to each corner. The trouble arrived without an entrance. A damp halo on the ceiling above the sink widened by the width of a coin, then a saucer, then a plate, as if the building breathed out a secret it had held all week. He fetched a bucket, set it on the counter, and climbed the step stool with the caution of a man who measured twice. The drip thickened to a fast knock. He shut the valve under the sink, then crossed the hall to the upstairs unit and listened. A television carried sports noise that made every word blend into crowd roar. He knocked and waited. He knocked again and named the problem through the door in his steady mechanic voice, calm, factual, without heat. The door opened to a man with tired eyes and a shirt dark with sweat at the collar. The man wiped his face with the hem and stepped aside. In the kitchen, a flex line at the base of the faucet had split along a tired seam. Alden asked for a wrench with a gesture because some men understand gestures faster than sentences. He replaced the line with a spare he had kept for weeks for no good reason beyond the instinct to carry what might be needed. The drip stopped. The air cooled. The television volume dropped as if the room itself sighed. When he returned to his unit, Tamsin stood in the doorway with a small notebook held at her side. She had arrived on the dot, and found an open door that smelled faintly of soap and warm rice. Neve greeted her with a nod sized for a classroom, and pointed toward the patched ceiling with the gravity of a witness. Tamsin took in the bucket, the clean counter, the fresh bulb outside, and the order along the table where bolts sat in patient rows. She asked what had happened without adding any tone that would force a defense. Alden explained the leak and the fix in a few clear lines. She wrote nothing for a long moment, then tucked the notebook away and asked to see the rest of the place. He showed the closet where shirts hung by color, the bathroom with new caulk gleaming against old porcelain, the small shelf of paperbacks lined like brickwork to shore up a weak wall. She looked at the meter of quiet in the room rather than the price of the furniture. The visit did not become a courtroom. It became a slow walk through proof. He showed the bus pass with a recent stamp, a warehouse schedule with his name printed in block letters, a receipt from the tool shop where he had bought the new bulb and the strip of caulk after lunch. He did not reach for grand claims. He pointed to small systems that were hard to fake. Neve placed her book back in her backpack and crossed to the kitchen to rinse a cup without making a sound. The drain took the water cleanly now. Tamsin noted the time aloud and watched how the evening routine began to fold over the room, as if a sheet were being smoothed. She asked about the previous fights and he gave the history without scrubbing it. He had been proud in the wrong way. Pride can make a man throw away a map, because the street feels familiar. She did not smile or frown at that sentence. She simply let the air rest around it until the heat went out. Footsteps hit the hall with the rhythm of a verdict. The landlord, Hart Benton, carried a key ring that chimed like a tin choir and a ledger that had seen more ink than repair. He scanned the bucket, the ceiling stain, the bins near the radiator, and the caseworker badge in a glance that tried to turn every object into leverage. He asked about extra occupants and late checks, and whether the fire escape door stuck in summer. Alden answered in the same clean register he used for stripped screws. He kept his shoulders steady and his gaze direct but not hot. He explained the leak upstairs and the fix, named the date of the next rent, and described the plan to move the bins on Saturday before noon. Tamsin stood where she could see both men, and did not insert herself because some tests grade themselves. The landlord shifted his weight, found no mess to cite, and went soft around the mouth in a reluctant concession. He muttered a note about a new paint code for the stairwell, and left the way he came in, keys busy, face already turning toward the next door. The room breathed again. Neve resumed her quiet sorting, building a small bridge across the corner of the table that held steady even when she tapped it with a finger. Tamsin circled once more, then paused at the doorway as if balancing two columns in her head. She spoke of a 30-day review, of a check-in after 2 weeks, of a small note she would add about the quick repair upstairs that had prevented damage in 2 units. She did not promise anything beyond the process, which is a kind of promise if a person can walk it. She asked Alden to meet her at the warehouse gate one morning, so she could verify the start time and watch him step in on the minute. He agreed because drama wastes air better spent on work. He walked her to the hall and waited until she reached the stairs. The apartment settled into evening. He set the alarm on a phone with a hairline crack across the corner that caught light like a thread of ice. He checked the porch and the street and found Westwood holding its plain line through the dark with a patience that felt like company. Morning slowed the noise and sharpened the edges. Down on Westwood, the first bus pulled a gray ribbon through the air, and the street lights settled back into the poles. Alden stood at the warehouse gate 10 minutes early with gloves tucked in his belt and a thermos that breathed steam. He watched shift workers slot into place like pieces cut by the same blade. Tamsin arrived on foot, left hand in her pocket, right hand carrying her notebook closed. She did not step in the way. She stood where the clock could see her, and watched Alden pass through the gate as the minute turned. No speech followed, only a small note taken, and a nod that said a line had been drawn and crossed without friction. He felt no swell of triumph because relief is not the same as victory. It is a floor that holds when your knee tests it. The day cut into long strips, and he worked each with his steady rhythm. Pallets slid and racks creaked, and the foreman checked boxes on a clipboard with the focus of a man who measures himself against lists. Near noon, a dock door jammed halfway up and refused to negotiate. The crew paused. The foreman cursed under his breath with the quick pace of a man who knows how much money fits into 10 minutes. Alden set his load down, crouched beside the track, and traced the problem with 2 fingers. A bracket had shifted and a wheel had cracked because a bolt had gone loose and then gone missing. He made a temporary fix from a washer and a short length of strap from a shipping crate, then spotted the true culprit in the spread where the metal had warped. He asked for a hammer with a gesture, shaped the edge back, and set 2 fasteners from his own pouch because he carried small spares the way some men carry charms. The door settled and rolled clean. The foreman watched without commentary, then marked something on the clipboard that was not a box. After shift, the sky held a pale nickel shine, and the river pushed its usual slow burden toward the lake. Tamsin met him outside the gate and walked 2 blocks without speaking, letting the noise peel away so the words would not fight for space. She said the home visit would file clean, that a provisional approval would land on the right desk before weekend, that the review would likely confirm the arrangement if the pattern held. She did not widen the promise because widening a promise makes it thin. She thanked him for the fast help upstairs the night before, and he answered with a small lift of the chin. They turned at the corner where the paint flakes off the handrail and scales. She mentioned a community repair night at the school gym, where volunteers taught basic fixes to tenants who were tired of waiting for keys on a ring that never reached their door. She asked if he would teach a session on safe patchwork for leaks and switches. He said yes, not as a favor, as a service rendered to the street that had held him. The week unfolded into a narrow band of sunlight that seemed to follow him along Westwood. He shaved each morning with care a barber would approve. He clocked in on the minute, and took breaks on the minute, and left only when the beam at the gate ticked over to close. He repaired the stairwell paint where a scuff had cut down the middle, then reset a loose handrail so steady that even Hart Benton paused with his keys mid-swing, and issued a grudging nod. Omari carried the bins out on Saturday, and returned with a small notebook scribbled with hours and places where day labor ran. He asked Alden to walk him through filling a form without skipping lines. Alden showed him how to lowercase every letter, so the scan would not mistake an A for a 4. Neve built a small table bridge that survived a fan turned on low. She laughed at it only after it held for a minute, then reworked it to hold longer, because laughter tastes better when structure proves itself. At the school gym, the community repair night bloomed in the practical way that beats theory. Tables lined the floor with old faucets, burned cords, stubborn switches, and the kind of screws that invent their own heads. Alden stood at Station 3 with a milk crate of parts and a cardboard sign written sharp with a marker. He showed how to cut power at a breaker, how to test a line with a cheap pen that glows, how to seal a joint so the water runs where the pipe intends. He taught in short sentences with the plain verbs he favored. He avoided jargon because code words are fences that hide solutions. Tamsin moved through the room with a list of names and a calm that turned anxiety into concentration. When the night ended, a man from a management company asked Alden if he could fix 2 sinks and a rail at a building near the bus lot. He wrote the address on a napkin, because napkins still matter in a city that trades favors faster than contracts. Days turned and the provisional became more solid. The foreman shifted him to a steadier line with fewer floating pieces, not because of a speech, because the dock door never stuck again. Tamsin filed the note, and watched the stamp hit the paper clean as a landing. The review board accepted the arrangement with language that felt designed for a different city, but worked fine here. Hart Benton arrived with a lease that held fair numbers, a small deduction for stairwell work, and a promise to replace the hallway smoke detector that had wheezed all winter. He did not smile while handing over the pages. He did not need to. The ink was smile enough. Alden signed with the careful block print he used when the page will matter years from now. Neve fetched a calendar and drew a small star on the square that matched the date, then placed a second star 2 weeks ahead to mark a pizza night of their own invention. Omari called one evening to say he had caught 2 shifts and a spot in a class that taught ladder safety and harness rules for rooftop work. He asked if Alden could show him how to tighten a belt so a fall becomes a bounce instead of a break. They met in the alley beside the gym and practiced tying off to a post that had survived 4 coats of paint. Omari learned fast, not from talent, from attention. He promised to bring bolts for Neve to sort from a junk bin at the yard. She accepted the barter with a solemn nod, and then added a small smile that she let slip only when a person kept a promise twice. The room grew a little more itself each day. The lamp with the burned shade went out to the curb and a new shade turned the light into a soft pool. The streak on the baseboard vanished under a patient hand. The curtain held its line. The door frame took a second coat that calmed the grain. On a quiet Sunday they walked to the lot where dandelions punched up between cracked lines, and found the tallest one standing without apology. Alden did not make a speech about resilience or grit. He simply knelt and showed Neve how the taproot holds even when the flower goes soft, then stood and brushed dirt from his hands. They bought a small plant from a sidewalk vendor, and carried it home in a paper bag that whistled against the rim. They set it on the window ledge where trains can be heard as a long breath through the siding, and watched it catch a thin slice of late light. Tamsin stopped by after dusk to hand him a printed copy of the approval, with a flat tone that hid relief. She reminded him of 2 checkpoints. He thanked her with the courtesy owed to the person who keeps the bridge open while you cross. She left, and the hall kept the sound of her steps like a meter you trust more than the clock. Night held the windows clean and the room answered with a calm hum. Neve set 3 bolts on the sill and balanced a coin across a bridge of washers until it crossed. Alden closed his notebook on numbers that finally lined up, and felt the floor steadier under his boots. Westwood kept its straight spine outside while inside the line bent just enough to let hope move through. He stood and let the quiet settle like fresh paint. Still he set the alarm and let the night keep on his time.